Colonel Nia Brooks is thrust into an intense and emotional battle as she attempts to bring the remains of a fallen hero back home. The situation takes a tense turn when airline staff suddenly refuse her access, citing security issues. With emotions at their peak, will she manage to overcome these obstacles and honor her solemn vow? Tune in to follow this heartfelt journey. Subscribe now to keep enjoying the content. Colonel Nia Brooks ran her fingers over the polished, camouflage-patterned surface of the military coffin, feeling the weight of the grief it contained. This was more than just a mission, it was a solemn promise to a fallen hero. The flight was booked, the arrangements made. All she had to do was get through security and board the plane to escort Private Brielle Carter home. As she approached the airline's boarding gate at the airport, she could feel the tension in the air. The bustling crowds moved around her, blissfully unaware of the gravity of her load. Her dress uniform was neatly ironed, the insignia gleaming brightly against the deep blue fabric, but as she stood there, she could feel the oppressive weight of looks, a mixture of curiosity and sympathy. "Excuse me, ma'am," the young airline attendant said firmly, her eyes averted. "I'm afraid you cannot board." "Pardon?" Colonel Nia Brooks raised an eyebrow, her seasoned voice steady yet laced with disbelief. "I am escorting the remains of a fallen soldier. This flight is crucial." "I understand that, Colonel," she replied, her voice unyielding. "But there are security concerns. I can't let you on." "Security concerns?" She glanced around as more passengers began to notice the interaction. "What are those concerns?" "I have all the necessary documentation. You can contact my superiors." Her gaze shifted slightly, unwilling to meet her head-on. "It's not something I can disclose. We just can't allow you on board." "So let me get this straight, you're concerned about my presence, while everyone else, right in front of my eyes, boards without issue?" Her voice had risen slightly, the disbelief morphing into frustration. "Ma'am, I'm going to have to ask you to step aside," she said monotonously, gesturing towards a small corner near the gate, her voice firm, yet a hint of uncertainty gleamed in her eyes. At that moment, Lieutenant Commander Sarah Hall, a high-ranking officer in the U.S. Navy, happened to be passing by. Her sharp eyes caught the scene unfolding. "Colonel," she called, breaking through the commotion of the crowd. "What's going on here?" Colonel Nia Brooks gave her a quick salute, grateful for the interruption. "Commander Hall, they won't let me board. I'm here to escort the remains of Private Brielle Carter home." Hall frowned, her expression hardening at the insolence displayed by the airline staff. "This is unacceptable. May I speak with a supervisor?" The young attendant hesitated but then nodded curtly, hurrying away to call someone. As more passengers gathered, phones appeared, cameras clicking as the atmosphere shifted towards a collective uncertainty. Subscribe now to keep enjoying the content. "Colonel," Hall said softly, trying to maintain a sense of calm in the storm. "I'll make sure you get on that plane. Stay here." Colonel Nia Brooks nodded, her heart racing. "Thank you, Commander. This isn't just an honor for me, it's a matter of respect for Private Brielle Carter's family." Before long, Brian Collins, a visibly tense airline manager, arrived, flanked by two security guards. "What's the issue?" he asked, crossing his arms defensively. The lieutenant commander stepped forward. "This officer is serving her country by escorting a fallen soldier. Why are you denying her boarding?" "The security procedures," Collins began, but Hall silenced him with a fierce glare. "Forget about your so-called security procedures. You're preventing a soldier from boarding while real threats stroll through the terminals unimpeded. You need to rethink your approach before this turns into a significant crisis for your airline," she argued. However, Collins remained unmoved, adamantly insisting that Colonel Nia Brooks posed a security threat to the other passengers. Lieutenant Commander Hall pulled out her phone and dialed the Major General in charge of the peacekeeping mission. "Sir, we have a situation. A colonel is being denied boarding by the airline while she's trying to escort the remains of a fallen soldier." Denial? For what reason? The Major General's voice boomed, filled with authority. This is unacceptable. Let me call a high-ranking officer from the airline immediately and demand answers. Understood, sir, Hall replied, determination etched on her features as she ended the call. Just moments later, a visibly nervous senior airline official approached, beads of sweat glistening on his forehead as he scanned the crowd. The air was thick with murmurs, with onlookers exchanging anxious glances between the airline staff and the stern military presence that filled the terminal. We've been instructed to allow Colonel Nia Brooks to board, he stammered, his voice barely rising above a whisper. I sincerely apologize for the inconvenience caused by our employees. This delay and refusal were entirely uncalled for. My deepest regrets. Regrets don't change the situation, Lieutenant Commander Hall snapped, her eyes like steel. You've not only embarrassed us, but the entire military community. And most importantly, you've shown complete disrespect for Private Brielle Carter's memory. The crowd shifted restlessly, tension crackling in the air. The airline official swallowed hard, glancing at the anxious faces around him. I understand. But this cannot be undone. If accountability falls on us, then so be it. We'll take the necessary measures. A voice from the crowd broke the uneasy silence. This isn't just a matter of rules. It's about honor, and you've failed to protect that. Hall nodded in agreement. Exactly. It's about respect for those who serve this country. You need to understand the gravity of your actions. Subscribe now to keep enjoying the content. Believe me, we don't take this lightly, the airline official replied, his demeanor shifting to one of sincerity. I'll make sure the appropriate people hear about this. We will make it right. As the passengers watched, Hall stepped forward, her resolve unyielding. Get Colonel Nia Brooks on that plane. Now. The official nodded, fingers moving feverishly over his phone as he hurried to send messages. Around them, the crowd murmured anxiously, a palpable mix of frustration and the demand for justice hanging in the air. In the following hours, whispers filled the backrooms of the airline headquarters, scattered discussions about imminent dismissals and formal apologies. Executives paced nervously, their brows furrowed with concern as they attempted to contain the mounting backlash. This is a disaster, one senior vice president muttered, running a hand through his hair. We can't afford more bad press. Not after everything that's happened already. Get someone on the phone to draft a public statement. We need to take responsibility, another snapped. But be careful, we can't show weakness or else it'll turn into a feeding frenzy. As news of the incident spread, the airline faced an escalating scandal. By the time Colonel Nia Brooks was boarding the plane, heads were rolling in boardrooms. The stark realization that a momentary lapse in judgment had ignited a national outcry weighed heavily on the airline management. Today, we honor our heroes, Colonel Nia Brooks said, taking a deep breath as he stepped onto the aircraft. The coffin containing Private Brielle Carter's remains was carefully lifted inside, the injustice of the earlier events still fresh but overshadowed by the solemn duty ahead. Settled into her seat, Nia Brooks scanned the cabin, meeting the gaze of various passengers. Some looked on with respectful nods, others with heads bowed in silent shame. It was a reminder that even amidst turmoil, there were those who understood the weight of loss and honor. As the plane began its ascent, Nia Brooks closed her eyes, her thoughts drifting back to Private Brielle Carter. The memories flooded her, shared laughter, late-night talks about dreams and families, the bond formed in the heat of duty. A gentle hand touched her shoulder, and she opened his eyes to see an elderly woman seated next to her. I just wanted to say thank you, Colonel. It takes a brave woman to stand up for what's right, she said softly, her eyes misty. Thank you, ma'am. It's the least I could do for a fallen comrade, she replied, her voice steady but filled with emotion. Her sacrifice was not in vain, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. You're ensuring she's remembered with dignity. Subscribe now to keep enjoying the content. As the plane climbed higher, Nia Brooks felt a sense of calm wash over her. The fight for justice, the struggle for respect, it was all worth it. She knew that no amount of corporate apologies could bring back Private Brielle Carter, but she also knew that honor would live on through actions like these. Flight attendants moved down the aisle, and a young man, seated a few rows over, stood up abruptly. "I'm sorry, everyone, but can we all just take a moment to remember why we're here?" he said, his voice rising above the hum of the cabin. "Let's take a moment for Sergeant Brielle Carter and everything she did for us." A silence fell over the aircraft, and one by one, passengers bowed their heads. The gravity of the situation became tangible, wrapping around them like a heavy blanket. "Thank you," Nia Brooks said quietly, almost to herself, feeling the weight of shared respect. It was more than just a tribute, it was a connection to the fallen, a reminder that their sacrifices would never be forgotten. The flight continued, and though the road ahead seemed heavy with the memories and responsibility she bore, Nia Brooks felt the spirit of Private Brielle Carter guiding her, just as it would continue to guide others who walked the path of honor. She was not alone in this mission. Together they would ensure that the legacy of their courage endured. Thanks for watching. Please subscribe to help our channel grow.